At the start of our story, we see an old man coughing and muttering, "I am an earthling from a civilized society. I came from a civilized society." Just then, a little girl enters his home carrying food. Seeing him in such a condition, she says, "Mr. Seo, are you okay? My mother sent this for you." We learn the old man's name is Seo. He thanks the girl. As she places the food on the ground, she replies, "It's not a problem. Please get well soon and make more soap." With that, she leaves, walking back toward her home through the snowstorm. This old man, Seo, once a CEO, is indeed an earthling and inhabitant of a highly civilized world. It has been 50 years since he fell into this cursed realm. He and several company employees, including Director Kim, were on their way to a workshop when a sudden landslide swept them away. When they awoke, they found themselves in a bizarre world, one filled with towering, three-tailed foxes, massive two-headed snakes, and sword-wielding warriors who soared through the sky. It was like one of the martial arts novels Seo occasionally read. Most of his colleagues adapted surprisingly well to this new world, except him. Among the 7 who fell into the martial world that day, their destinies unfolded rapidly. Within just 3 days, ethereal, sage-like beings descended from the skies and were astonished by his colleagues' mythical talents. Each of them was taken away except for Seo and Director Kim. They had hoped that they too would be chosen or discover some hidden ability. But neither had any unique talent. With no knowledge of this world, they could do little else but manual labor. For 6 months, they worked menial jobs in a bustling marketplace just to eat. Then one day, Director Kim had enough. He spent all his savings on a third-rate martial arts manual sold on the street. Everyone mocked him, but within 3 months, he had mastered it and became a full-fledged martial artist. He told Seo that he couldn't keep living like this and spent all his money on a third-rate martial arts book being sold on the streets. Everyone laughed at him. But within 3 months, he mastered it and became a full-fledged martial artist. He served the nation and continued learning increasingly advanced martial arts. After becoming a powerful warrior, Director Kim departed for the Jianghu, leaving Seo behind. Seo simply wished that something special might happen to him too. But in the end, nothing ever did. After 50 years, he is now merely an old man dying from a simple cold. He coughs up blood, repeating that he is from Earth. He did his best to survive. He learned the language, learned to read and write, worked as a laborer to earn a living, bought a small piece of land, and built his own house. He started earning some decent money when he began making soap using lye. In this medieval era, soap was practically a new concept. However, even that came to an end when some thieves stole his soap-making method and began producing their own. These thugs forced him out of the market. Now, he waits for death, having been rejected by this world. A frustrated CEO questions the world. "What do you want from me? Even though I gave it my all, what more must I do?" He begins to cry, wondering why he couldn't have been chosen, even if he wasn't special, and why he keeps losing everything. Now, Seo no longer has the strength to keep his eyes open. As they begin to close, he wishes that if he just had a little more power, maybe, just maybe, he could have had more chances. Lying in bed, sick with a cold, his life comes to an end. That was how he died, and how, bathed in a bright light, he opened his eyes once more. He slowly looked down at his body. It wasn't a hand covered in wrinkles and lines. It was a young hand, full of vitality and life. He was dressed in something clearly unlike the clothes of this world, the blue shirt and sweatpants he had worn back on Earth. He looked around, trying to make sense of the situation. Then he spotted Director Kim, Chief O, Section Chief John, Deputy Manager Kong, Deputy Manager O, and Manager Kim. Seo was stunned to see them. At that moment, he finally understood. He hadn't arrived in this world powerless. He had gained the power of regression. This was Seo's first regression. Director Kim, with half his hair shaved off, glanced around and asked, "What's going on?" "We were just heading to a workshop." He wasn't sure where they were, but Seo knew. This was the very first day. They had just arrived in this strange world. Seo recalled how they got here. They were in an SUV heading to the workshop when a landslide struck, and then something flashed. It was a memory from 50 years ago, so it was a little hazy, and even he couldn't remember it clearly. While he was thinking this, someone suddenly called out from behind, "Hey, Deputy Manager." But he was still lost in thought, wondering, "Now that I've regressed, how should I live?" In regression novels, people usually thrive using their future knowledge, but all I know is how to make soap. Suddenly, the man behind grabbed Seo's shoulder and shouted, "Manager Seo Yoon-hyun." Seo snapped out of his daydream at the shout. He turned around and saw it was Section Chief John. Seo said, trying to explain that he was slightly startled. But suddenly, with a swish, Section Chief John slapped Seo across the face. Everyone present was stunned to witness it. Section Chief John shouted, "Deputy Manager Seo, you bastard! You fell asleep while driving on the mountainside. You nearly got us all killed." Seo stood there, dazed by the slap. He had forgotten about this deputy manager title. It was a title he hadn't heard in so long that he didn't realize Section Chief Jien was talking to him. Section Chief Jien glared at Seo and asked, "Manager Seo, do you want to lose your job the moment we return?" Hearing that, Seo recalled the face he hadn't seen in ages, Section Chief Jien Myong-hun. He was the nephew of John Myong-kail, the executive director of the company Seo worked for. At just 32, he had already secured the section chief position through nepotism. When John Myong-hun was about to lunge at Seo in anger, Chief O stood up and held him back. He told Jan that was enough, since the landslide wasn't something Deputy Manager Seo could have done anything about. But Jan shouted again, asking, "Aren't you upset, Chief O? This crazy jerk was dozing off. That's why we're in this mess." Hearing that, Seo remembered that he really had dozed off while driving. But the reason he was so tired was because John had dumped all his work on Seo the day before the workshop, the tasks John had been avoiding, forcing Seo to stay up all night. Thinking back again, Seo also recalled that originally the person assigned to drive was John. He was the one who was supposed to drive. Pointing at Seo, John shouted, "The stupid bastard. We're stranded because of him." But Seo was gradually beginning to remember his memories from 50 years ago. Back then, Seo was so stunned he couldn't grasp what was going on. So, without thinking, he apologized to John. He even believed it was his own mistake. Then he spent the next 50 years just like that, constantly apologizing to people. Even when a group of bandits stomped over him and stole his belongings, when a damned martial artist insulted him, or when a regional official seized everything he had in the name of taxes, he kept apologizing. But there was one thing Seo came to realize after years of bottling it up. Sure, he had to control his temper in front of those he couldn't face, but not in front of everyone. Seo got up and, with a calm expression, said, "Section Chief John, I know you're upset, but this isn't the time to be blaming others." Hearing that, John became furious and charged at him. He punched Seo again, yelling, "Are you picking a fight?" That punch made Seo realize he didn't have to kneel before someone he could deal with. He turned back and punched John in the face, sending him flying. Watching that, everyone there was completely shocked. They couldn't believe their eyes. Seo kept punching John. In his previous life, Seo had been beaten by martial artists countless times. He was attacked by bandits while collecting herbs in the mountains, by more bandits during years of poor harvest, and even by officials because he couldn't pay his taxes. Now, Seo pinned John down, not giving him a single chance to fight back. Seeing this, everyone stood frozen in place, unsure of what to do. In that violent world, Seo managed to gain something the others didn't. He gained violence. When you strike someone in the eyes, their fear multiplies. And after a beating like that, only two words naturally come out of an opponent's mouth: "I'm sorry." Those were the exact words John spoke when Seo struck him in the eyes. Though Seo may not have the mythical talents mentioned by those transcendent individuals or the amazing martial arts that would make him famous in the martial arts world, he now did have the ability to change fate. Director Kim, Chief O, Assistant Manager Kong, Assistant Manager O, and Manager Kim were all staring at Seo with anxious eyes. Among them, Director Kim finally spoke with a shaking voice. "Deputy Manager Seo, no matter what, how could you go that far and assault a fellow colleague?" Seo didn't defend himself and calmly accepted it, saying, "Yes, you're right, Director Kim. I just lost my temper in that moment. I'm sorry for frightening everyone, though I won't be seeing any of you again anyway." He gave a polite bow to Director Kim and the other employees, apologizing for not doing more at the time, since he was the one driving. Director Kim responded by saying that yes, Section Chief Jien had been a bit too harsh, and that Seo couldn't really have done anything about the landslide. Still, Jien had overreacted. He then asked Seo to apologize to Jien personally, knowing that Seo would still be seeing Director Kim. Seo listened to his words because Director Kim would eventually become one of the strongest martial artists there once he began training. If Seo supported him as much as possible in this life, he was certain he'd benefit from it too. That meant he had to get on Director Kim's good side early on. Seo turned to Jen and, while extending a hand, apologized, admitting that his reaction had been excessive. Jen, his face bruised from Seo's beating, looked furious and seemed ready to attack him, but paused when he saw Seo staring back with lifeless eyes and no trace of fear. Once everyone had settled down, Director Kim glanced toward the forest and suggested, "Why don't we try to get out of these woods and search for a village?" Seo agreed as it was the logical step, but he knew this place was different. Immortals roamed freely in pursuit of eternal life, and the only law that ruled here was, the strong devour the weak. The people of this land, the Murim, fought with blades for wealth and honor. The name of this forest was Ascension Path. There were no villages, cities, or nations anywhere nearby. Seo turned to Director Kim and suggested, "Since the sun is about to set, why don't we set up a shelter in a safe spot?" Director Kim agreed that Seo's suggestion made sense but asked, "What about the car? We packed quite a lot of stuff in it for the workshop." There were many things in that car they could use, but only Seo knew they wouldn't be able to locate the car. He also knew they wouldn't trust him, so he decided to just let them search for the car instead of wasting his energy trying to persuade them. He suggested that they should split up. One team could search for shelter, and the other could try to find the car. They would meet back here before it got completely dark. After a few hours, they lit a fire in a cave close to the spot where they had first arrived. While eating, a black-haired girl said she didn't understand. "We were caught in a landslide while inside a car. So how did we end up here when the car is missing?" Director Kim nodded in agreement with the girl, saying he didn't understand it either. Everyone was gathered around the fire, eating. Pointing at the food, a girl remarked, "This tastes like chestnuts." Hearing that, Seo asked her if it was crispy. He told them he had plenty of it so they could eat as much as they liked. Hearing that, Director Kim chuckled and said, "It's quite a serious situation, but thanks to Manager Seo, we're actually enjoying ourselves." He complimented Seo, saying, "I knew you were this reliable even back at the company." While everyone was eating, Seo noticed John sleeping in a corner, refusing to eat anything. Director Kim raised his voice slightly so John could hear, "Manager Seo, if I remember right, you were exhausted while driving because you had to work late last night." The others agreed with Director Kim. A brown-haired girl told him their manager is truly hardworking. A red-haired girl also complimented Seo, saying, "It feels like we are on a camping trip thanks to this cave Manager Seo discovered." Seo knew they were right, since in his previous life they had only discovered this place after wandering in the woods for hours. But he remained humble and told them he had just been lucky. Hearing that, everyone laughed and told Seo he should just accept the compliment. Seo also felt that he should enjoy this moment, as tonight would be the last time they could laugh like this. The next morning, shaking with fear, Seo offered his greetings to the Lord of the Forest. The Lord of the Forest Seo was greeting was a massive seven-tailed fox with glowing red eyes. The fox gazed at Seo and, smiling, said, "You carry quite a distinct scent for a human. Even after living for thousands of years, I've never encountered humans like you." Hearing the noise outside, the black-haired girl woke up. She stepped out and asked Seo what was going on. But the moment she saw the enormous fox, fear took over and she screamed. Hearing her scream, the others also woke up and rushed out of the cave. When they saw the giant fox, they too were terrified and screamed. Hearing them, Seo turned around and shouted, telling everyone to show respect to the Lord of the Forest and kneel down. Upon hearing Seo, the seven-tailed fox said, "Every time I encounter you humans, I'm reminded of how foolish and disrespectful you all are." It told them that normally it would tear off all their limbs, but since one among them seemed to understand how to show proper respect, it would let them go this time. With that said, the fox declared they must pay a price for trespassing in his territory. If one of them offered an arm, he would allow them to remain here. Hearing the fox speak, everyone was already deeply frightened, and after hearing its demand, their fear only grew worse. Seo was also terrified because in his previous life, everyone who saw this creature had screamed in panic and they were all killed after enraging the fox. But this time, Seo felt slightly relieved seeing that the fox acknowledged his respectful behavior and wasn't tearing off all their limbs like before. Then, licking its lips, the seven-tailed fox asked who would offer their arm. Seo reasoned that it was just one person's arm that was all they needed to sacrifice. Besides, a lost arm could be healed by the cultivators who would arrive 2 days later. On top of that, Seo had already prepared an herb that would help reduce the pain. Thinking all that, Seo rolled up his sleeves and reached out his hand toward the seven-tailed fox. While trembling, he told it that he would offer his arm. Everyone was stunned that Seo was willing to sacrifice his hand for them. The seven-tailed fox opened its mouth and swiftly lunged at Seo, saying, "You know your manners, so in return I'll try to make it as painless as possible." Then, in the very next second, with a loud cry of agony, Seo lost one arm. The seven-tailed fox had completely bitten off his hand and devoured it. Everyone turned their eyes away. They couldn't bear to witness the horrifying scene unfold before them. Seo was overwhelmed by the pain. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he reached out with his remaining arm to grab the herb. The pain was so unbearable that he couldn't focus on anything else in that moment. He quickly consumed the herb he had prepared to relieve the pain. After devouring Seo's hand, the seven-tailed fox told him that it had expected him to taste different because of his unusual scent, but in the end, he tasted just like any other human. In fact, it said he tasted even worse due to all the impurities flowing through his veins. Hearing that, Seo slowly began to regain his senses. He was surprised to realize that the herb had actually eased the pain more than he expected. After calming down, Seo apologized to the seven-tailed fox, saying his offering wasn't good enough. But the fox showed no interest in continuing the conversation. It turned away and began to leave, telling them they were allowed to stay in its territory for 7 days, and during that time they wouldn't die thanks to its divine protection. Saying that, it leapt into the sky at incredible speed and vanished. After the seven-tailed fox left, the worried group rushed towards Seo to check on him. Seo slowly got to his feet and asked everyone to head back inside, saying he would explain everything once they were in the cave. Seo calmly explained that he had encountered the fox earlier that morning when he left the cave. The fox had told him that they were now in Murim. Everyone was stunned to hear that they were in Murim. Director Kim asked Seo if he truly meant Murim, as it was hard to believe something so unreal. Seo said it didn't matter and assured them they would be safe for a week since he had sacrificed his arm. Hearing that it was only for a week, Director Kim asked Seo what would happen after that. Breathing heavily, Seo replied that the next week they would have to give up something else. Hearing that, everyone was left in shock. As the herb began to take full effect, Seo started feeling drowsy. He told the others he was feeling sleepy and would rest for a while, hoping they'd understand. With that, he dozed off right there. Then, 15 hours later, at night, Seo woke up alone inside the cave. He could hear his colleagues talking outside. They were all upset with Jian, questioning how he could claim that manager Seo had willingly sacrificed his own arm. Jian snapped back, asking, "Then who's willing to give up their arm or leg every week?" But Chifo responded, saying that manager Seo was extremely valuable, as he was the one who had provided them with both food and shelter. Then John suggested that they should learn as much as possible from Seo within the week, adding that since he had already lost an arm, he likely wouldn't survive much longer anyway. That's why, he said, Seo should be the one to make the sacrifice again. John said all that, not knowing Seo had woken up and was listening from behind. Seo was shocked to hear that now that he had become so weak, John wanted to cut off one of his limbs every week to feed the fox. That was certainly not pleasant. Staring at John, Seo picked up a rock from the ground. He stared at the rock and thought that, with all the violence he had learned from being beaten for 50 years, he could easily kill a modern man like John Hune with just one arm. He glanced at John again, who was still trying to persuade the others to make Seo surrender his other arm too. Furiously, Seo wondered to himself whether he should kill John, but he chose not to act impulsively. Instead, he tossed the rock aside and walked back to the cave. He realized that fear had clearly frozen their minds, and if he behaved too harshly now, it could create problems in his relationship with Director Kim. Suddenly, Chifo yelled at John to keep quiet if he didn't want his ankles broken again. Hearing that, Seo chuckled. He had been right to believe they were good people. It was simply a confusing situation for everyone. The following morning, as the sun rose, everyone assembled in front of the cave. This time, a two-headed snake appeared before them. But unlike the fox that had devoured Seo's arm, the two-headed snake merely asked for a small amount of blood. It was the exact same snake that had drained Chifo's blood, the one who had lost his limbs in his previous life. Hearing that it was only a small amount, A nervous Chief O stepped forward and offered his arm this time. But after drinking Chief O's blood, the snake gagged and vomited, saying, "This is disgusting. This is the worst human blood I've ever tasted." Hearing that, Chief became furious, but Seo understood it was the blood of a 21st century worker, soaked in nicotine and cholesterol. No wonder it tasted awful. Seo then turned around and asked John Mong-hoon to join him in gathering some herbs. Hearing that, John was stunned and asked Seo if he had really used his full name. But Seo didn't respond. Instead, he asked John if he was hungry. John replied that he was. Seo walked up to John and said, "I'll teach you about the fruits and edible herbs, so come with me." Seo leaned in and whispered to John that he intended to offer his arm to the fox again next week. And if he didn't survive, someone had to know how to live in this forest. Hearing that, John became extremely frightened, realizing that Seo had overheard everything the previous night. He had no option but to thank Seo and agreed to go along with him. Hearing his gratitude, Seo quietly laughed to himself because only he knew the fox wasn't returning, and Jian would never get the chance to use this knowledge. As the two of them reached a place filled with fruit trees, Seo shouted, "Jong Hun, how many times do I have to tell you that's the wrong fruit concentrate?" Seo apologized while picking a red fruit. Watching this, Seo warned him that eating that fruit could get him killed. This went on for hours as Seo kept giving instructions to John, and Jian had no choice but to follow them. Eventually, Jian began to feel drained and asked Seo to wait a moment, saying he needed a break. He had been digging endlessly to collect these herbs. Seeing his condition, Seo quietly laughed to himself because this was exactly how Jian had punished him when he first joined the company. Seo told Jian they had to finish before nightfall, so they needed to move quickly. Time passed gradually, and both kept working on their tasks. Then suddenly, John unearthed a huge ginseng. John was stunned to see it. Holding it in his hand, he said, "This thing is massive." He asked Seo if it was real ginseng. Seo replied that it was something like that. Seo knew that while it looked like ginseng, to be accurate, it was actually a yellow bamboo root. It could be due to the ascension path being so filled with energy, but here, yellow bamboo roots, usually no bigger than a pinky finger, had grown to this enormous size. Seo knew it wouldn't be very useful for cultivators, but it was an incredibly valuable medicine for martial artists known to boost ki, and it would likely benefit Director Kim. While they were talking, they discovered two more right nearby. Amazed, John asked Seo if it was alright to dig up so much wild ginseng. Seo naturally said yes and told him to take off his shirt and use it to carry them. Seo then glanced at the setting sun and noticed a crack in space. Seeing it, he realized that the cultivators would be arriving soon. He said to John, "Let's head back." As they made their way to the cave, the crack Seo had noticed earlier suddenly erupted with a massive blast, releasing an enormous surge of spiritual energy into the sky. At the moment of the explosion, Jian collapsed to the ground, screaming and holding his head. He wasn't the only one. Chief O was in the same state, along with Manager Kong. All three clutched their heads, crying out in agony. Seeing this, Director Kim started to panic, asking what was happening to them. Just then, three cultivators appeared, soaring through the sky. Looking at John, Chief O, and Manager Kong, a cultivator named Buko, dressed in golden robes, said, "What a surprise, who would have thought we'd find such raw talent here?" A black-cloaked cultivator named Huwok told Buko to back off, claiming they were his. Hearing this, the third cultivator, dressed in blue, called Huwok shameless. Watching these cultivators, Director Kim became frightened and asked who they were. The cultivators noticed there were 7 individuals, but only 3 of them had spiritual roots. The others were simply ordinary mortals. Then Buko lifted his hand and formed a ball of lightning. He hurled it at John, who screamed in agony as thousands of lightning bolts surged through his body. When Buko finally stopped, he was astonished by how remarkable John's body was. It was the body of heavenly golden thunder. Then Huwok stepped forward, telling Buko to step aside as it was his turn. He was holding a musical instrument, and as he began to play, Manager Kong, who had her ears covered, suddenly started screaming in pain. But it wasn't an ordinary scream. It was so loud that it echoed throughout the entire forest. Seeing this, Huwok became overly excited, realizing that Manager Kong possessed the ghostly and transforming immortal root. He had never imagined that something like this truly existed. Then it became the third cultivator's turn. He landed on the ground and, placing a hand on Chief's shoulder, infused him with spiritual energy. He examined Chief's body and discovered that it was a unique holy body. Chief was completely stunned and asked the cultivator what was happening. The cultivator smiled and announced that he would take all three of them as disciples of the Azure Heaven Creation sect, since each of them had the potential to change the entire world. In a deep voice, he asked Chief, "How does that sound?" Chief O was terrified in the cultivator's presence. He could barely breathe. He was overwhelmed, wondering what this power was, and felt like refusing might cost him his life. Suddenly, Huok descended and urged Chief O to join the Black Ghost Valley instead, saying they possessed every cultivation method: immortality, the power to defy the heavens, fame, and fortune. He vowed that they would receive all of it within 100 years. Moments later, Buko also came down and questioned Huok, asking what he was talking about, claiming that the Golden Divine Heavenly Thunder sect was the one most suited for them. While they were arguing, Director Kim stepped in and asked the cultivators if they could help them escape the forest, as at this rate they would all end up dying there. But the cultivators paid him no attention. Buko pulled out a bottle, opened its cap and said, "Mortals worry too much. How did you make it to the ascension path with such a useless body?" Saying this, he aimed the mouth of the bottle at John, and it instantly pulled John inside. John could do nothing but scream for help. Then the blue-robed cultivator took Chief O and glanced at Seo. He smiled and said, "Looks like one of them lost an arm to that fox." Noticing the wound, he decided to help personally. He channeled his spiritual power to heal Seo's hand, telling him that although he was just a mortal, he had courage. Seo's entire hand regenerated, and he expressed his thanks to the cultivator. He also took Manager Kong along with him. Then all three cultivators soared back into the sky, and before leaving, they told Seo that they had captured all the beasts and monsters along the ascension path on their way here, so the area would remain safe for the next 10 years. Watching them leave, Director Kim ran after them, asking them to wait and to tell them which direction to go, since they had no idea how to get out. He shouted for Section Chief John, Chief O, and Deputy Manager Kong, but it was pointless. The cultivators ascended into the sky and vanished. Watching them disappear, Seo felt deeply disappointed, but it was pointless. The same thing had happened 50 years ago. No matter how loudly they shouted, those cultivators treated them like insects and simply moved on. Still, Seo felt a small sense of relief, knowing they had at least healed his arm. While running after them, Director Kim became out of breath and collapsed to the ground, asking, "What do you expect us to do in a forest like this?" But just before he completely gave up hope, Director Kim suddenly noticed several beams of light soaring in the same direction the cultivators had gone. Seeing that, he grew confused and asked, "What are all those lights in the sky? Is something over in that direction?" But Director Kim couldn't abandon his team, so he turned back. The following day, heavy rain poured down with lightning flashing all around. All four, Deputy Manager O, Manager Kim, Manager CIO, and Director Kim, were taking shelter in the same cave. But Deputy Manager O's condition was worsening. She lay on the ground, coughing up blood. Manager Kim asked CIO if there was any kind of herb they could use, as Deputy Manager O's condition was critical. She was panicking, unsure of what to do. Aware of what the future held, CIO told Manager Kim, "Let's wait a bit longer. Someone might show up and heal her." Hearing that, Manager Kim looked confused. Suddenly, they heard the sound of footsteps. Someone stepped into the cave and said, "Mortals on the ascension path are like ants, struggling in the battles between dragons." Seeing the man, Director Kim quickly stepped forward and asked, "Who are you?" The man smiled and replied, "I am the Sea Dragon King." The Sea Dragon King Sio informed them that Deputy Manager O was manipulating the storm outside. Upon hearing that, everyone stood in shock. The Sea Dragon King clarified that the storm had abruptly appeared from nowhere, so he arrived to investigate its origin. Pointing toward Deputy Manager O, he said that the woman lying there must have performed the sorcery behind the storm. The Sea Dragon King was astonished because she seemed like an ordinary woman, lacking even a hint of cultivation. So how could she possess such immense power? Moreover, she wasn't even doing it intentionally, which made it even stranger. Hearing that, Seo explained to the Sea Dragon King that in truth, they were the ones confused. They had only arrived in this place recently, yet one after another, formidable beings like him appeared and took away their companions. Upon hearing this, the Sea Dragon King burst into laughter. He asked Seo if he was claiming that among his teammates there were a few with exceptional potential, and then, as though it had been pre-arranged, powerful cultivators arrived and took them, and now he too had appeared right in front of this woman. Seo told the Sea Dragon King that's exactly what had occurred. Gazing at Seo, the Sea Dragon King grinned and asked, "Dear mortal, do you have any idea where we are?" He informed Seo that this location was called the Ascension Path, or simply the Path to Ascension. It served as a vital gateway that leads directly to the upper realm. Within just a few months, a dimensional rupture named the Ascension Gate would open right around this very area. It occurs once every 1,000 years. Innumerable high-ranking cultivators and spiritual entities would have already started assembling near the Path to Ascension to reach the upper realm. So, isn't it perfectly reasonable that cultivators like him would show up near them? Upon hearing that, they finally grasped the full picture. Then Director Kim told the Sea Dragon King that those cultivators mentioned they were taking his companions to join their sect. And if those cultivators were indeed ascending to the upper realm, how could his colleagues possibly accompany them? Listening to that, the Sea Dragon King explained that it might be difficult for ordinary mortals like them to comprehend. He pulled out a bottle similar to the ones the cultivators carried and explained that there was a technique among cultivators used to compress large objects and store them inside enchanted tools like this. Those cultivators had likely stored their sect within such items. Their intention was to ascend to the upper realm together with their entire sect once the Ascension Gate opened. The Sea Dragon King informed them that, in fact, he too had sealed one of the undersea castles belonging to his Sea Dragon clan inside this very item. Within it, 1,800 sea dragons lay dormant. Upon hearing that, Seo and Director Kim's jaws dropped in utter shock. The Sea Dragon King gently patted Deputy Manager O's head, saying she was unusual and fascinating. If she were to become part of the Sea Dragon clan, she could turn into someone truly remarkable. Watching him pat the unconscious Deputy Manager O's head, Director Kim lunged forward to stop the Sea Dragon King. But in the very next moment, he dropped to his knees as an immense force pinned him to the ground. Whenever Director Kim attempted to resist that force, it only intensified, applying even more crushing pressure on him. The one exerting that pressure was the Sea Dragon King. He raised Deputy Manager O in his hand and told Director Kim that he would offer her his blood and acknowledge her as his kin, and that would be best for everyone. That he then offered one more piece of advice. Looking at Director Kim with his glowing green eyes, he warned him never to casually question high-level cultivators. Right after he said that, the pressure on both Director Kim and Seo intensified and both of their eyeballs popped out. Cradling Deputy Manager O in his arms, the Sea Dragon King walked away, telling them he had only answered because of his generosity, otherwise most cultivators would have slain them for simply asking a question. With that, he exited the cave and stepped into the raging thunderstorm, transformed into his true dragon form and soared back into the sky. His dragon form was so massive and powerful that it seemed to stretch up into the heavens. By the next morning, the thunderstorm abruptly ended and the skies cleared. Manager Kim was still in complete shock over the fact that all her co-workers had been taken away. She couldn't comprehend what was happening, first an avalanche from nowhere, then immortals and dragons taking away their companions. It was too much for her to process and she began losing her mind. Seeing her in that state, Seo moved toward her, trying to comfort her. But while trembling, Manager Kim said, "Manager Seo, please, you must not be taken too. If you're taken, I won't be able to survive alone in this forest." Saying that, she burst into tears. Seeing her in that state, Seo wished to reassure her that he wouldn't leave, but deep down, he knew that, sadly, their time was almost up. Just then, Manager Kim felt something inside her head and let out a scream. She collapsed, clutching her head, and told Seo that something was approaching. Watching her scream, Director Kim rushed over and asked, "What's going on with her now?" Suddenly, the entire jungle descended into chaos. Birds in the sky and animals throughout the forest began fleeing for their lives. Manager Kim began trembling and told them that it was Head. Hearing that, Director Kim grew confused, and before he could process anything, an old man riding a mechanical lion suddenly appeared. That old man was startled to see mortals there and questioned how mere mortals had entered the path to ascension. But after observing them briefly, It didn't take the old man long to figure it out. With the ascension gate about to open, the surrounding space had turned unstable, and they must have been swept into a spatial storm. He laughed aloud, praising himself as a genius for instantly grasping the situation. He then stepped down from his mechanical lion and asked them who had just released that immense consciousness. He chuckled, saying it was such a potent presence that he had assumed a sage from the upper realm had arrived. Glancing at Deputy Manager O's state, he inquired if it was her. Director Kim stepped forward and blocked the old man, saying, "Manager Kim is our companion." But with a mere flick of his finger, the old man hurled Director Kim to the side. Witnessing that, Co instantly leapt forward to catch Director Kim in an attempt to shield him. He managed to catch him, but was also thrown back, crashing hard onto the ground. Director Kim remained unhurt and expressed his gratitude to Deputy Manager Co, but Co didn't respond. Seeing that, Director Kim grew alarmed and helped Co to his feet. To their surprise, Co's entire back was exposed and injured from the impact with the ground. Director Kim was stunned to see that and asked Co if he was all right. Co, in a slow and weak voice, told Director Kim that he was fine. Meanwhile, the old man approached Deputy Manager O and gently held her by the chin, asking, "Let me take you in. You don't possess any spiritual root, but I can awaken it within you using my power." The old man pondered what might occur if such a peculiar consciousness developed into a cultivator's divine consciousness. Hearing that, Deputy Manager O began crying and looked towards Co and Director Kim for help. When he saw her turning to them, the old man looked at Co and Director Kim and questioned whether she was still clinging to her worldly attachments even after his offer to take her in. This enraged the old man. Channeling his power, he seized both Co and Director Kim by the neck and lifted them into the air. Both of them began gasping for breath. The old man told Deputy Manager O that he would personally sever all her worldly bonds. Watching them struggle like that, Deputy Manager O became terrified. She started weeping, pleading with the old man to stop. She told him she would do whatever he wanted if only he would spare them. Hearing her, the old man told Deputy Manager O that she must let go of all her worldly attachments. While sobbing, Deputy Manager O told him that she understood. After hearing that, the old man decided to spare Co and Director Kim, and both of them collapsed to the ground. However, the old man realized that if he let them remain there, she would stay emotionally bound to them. So he resolved to send them to a nearby mortal nation. As he said this, he activated his spiritual powers and opened a portal. The old man informed Deputy Manager O that both of her colleagues would be scattered randomly through a dimensional rift, and even he couldn't predict where they would land. No sooner had he said that than a large portal opened and began pulling Co and Director Kim inside. Director Kim was sucked into the portal almost instantly without even grasping what was happening. Co, before being pulled in, used all his remaining strength to grab the herbs he had gathered the day before. Then both of them vanished into the portal. At the portal's edge, Deputy Manager O stood crying for them. As the portal closed, everything turned pitch black. Suddenly, the noise of a bustling crowd filled their ears. A street vendor's voice rang out saying, "We have the finest silks in Yango. Fresh scriptures from Shanji have just arrived." Both Co and Director Kim lay unconscious on the ground. Co was the first one to regain consciousness. As he rose to his feet, he looked ahead and noticed that he was in an alleyway with many people walking along the street nearby. Co didn't recognize the place and began wondering where he had ended up. The reason it felt unfamiliar was that, in his previous life, he had never landed in a place like this. He got up slowly, realizing that the Immortal had spoken the truth. The location where they fell was completely random. As Co exited the alleyway, he felt that the path ahead looked oddly familiar. Looking around carefully, he finally understood this was the place where he had once spent 50 years of his life. Right in front of him stood a massive 10-story building. Upon seeing that structure, he finally realized that he was in the capital of Yango, Seeing City. After witnessing the scene outside, Co went back to Director Kim and woke him up. Director Kim was extremely exhausted and told Manager Co that he couldn't keep up with everything going on anymore. Sitting beside Co, he told Director Kim he felt the same way. It would be nice if this were all simply a dream. Director Kim couldn't believe that it was just the two of them remaining, but he thought he should feel relieved that they hadn't been taken by those monsters. Co simply looked at the confused Director Kim and didn't say a thing, because even he wasn't sure about this. He may have regressed, but in his former life, he had been nothing more than a powerless herb gatherer. Seo then told Director Kim that they couldn't remain in this alleyway forever. So why didn't they head out from here? Director Kim said, "All right," and both of them walked out of the alleyway. But as they stepped out, all the people of that place began staring at them while speaking in some unfamiliar language. Hearing those voices, Director Kim became very confused. He asked Seo, "What are they saying? Sounds like Chinese. Why is everyone whispering while looking at us?" Seo told Director Kim that some of the people were saying the clothes they were both wearing seemed funny. Hearing that, Director Kim was stunned. Seo smiled and assured him not to worry because he understood a bit of Chinese. Director Kim wanted to ask something, but noticing Seo's wounded back, he stayed quiet and said, "That's great." Seo said that, but in truth he had lied to Director Kim. The language those people were using was not Chinese. Other than the fact that they shared the same characters, it sounded completely unfamiliar. In his previous life, Seo had endured the mockery of beggars for 2 months just to grasp the basics of the language. But now there was no reason for that. Seo pulled out the herbs he had gathered earlier and asked Director Kim if they should get some fresh clothes. Hearing that, Director Kim was puzzled and asked how, since he felt the people in this place wouldn't accept their currency. Seo didn't explain anything to Director Kim and simply led him to the city's medicine hall. The medicine hall's owner was astonished to see the ginseng and asked Seo if he was truly letting them purchase such valuable herbs. Seo acted confident and told the owner that those yellow bamboo roots were at least 800 years old. The owner said, "Of course," and added that the roots should be valued at around 15 silver ingots. Hearing 15 silver ingots, even Seo became uneasy, as he had never possessed that much money in his past life. But he kept his composure and urged the shopkeeper to hurry and take the money. The shopkeeper agreed and instantly handed over the silver to Seo. After leaving, Seo and Director Kim first bought some clothes and then purchased a house in the city. Director Kim was surprised to see the house they would be living in. Seo said yes and told Director Kim that starting today, he would teach him the language of this world. Hearing that, Director Kim became very happy and thanked Manager Seo. Seo made it appear as if everything was fine. But after bribing a few people for identity plaques and purchasing the land and home, they were left with only 1 silver ingot. He assumed it was because they were in the capital and that's why everything cost so much. While Seo was examining the money, Director Kim noticed Seo's back. Even though he was wearing fresh clothes, due to the injuries on his back, his new outfit had turned red. Realizing how much Seo had done for him, Director Kim suggested to Seo that since they were now in a completely new place, why didn't he just call him by his name? Surprised to hear that, Seo told Director Kim that he was okay with that. Director Kim smiled and thanked him while addressing him by his full name, Seo Yoon-hyun. Later that night, after settling inside the house, Seo explained to Director Kim that the reason he had been able to get all that silver was because he had sold those herbs. Pointing toward the 2 remaining ginseng roots lying in front of him, Seo told Director Kim that they wouldn't have any steady income once the herbs ran out, so they needed to come up with a way to generate money. Hearing that, Director Kim glanced at the ginseng and pondered. Then suddenly, he came up with an idea and suggested to Seo that they use the silver they'd get from selling the remaining herbs to start a business. It was a solid plan. Seo understood that with the money they could earn from this, along with Director Kim's experience from being a director in a mid-sized company, they should be able to sustain a living. But that didn't seem enough. Seo figured that since he had regressed, why not aim higher? He knew Director Kim was a martial arts prodigy, who, after reading some third-rate martial arts manuals sold on the streets, became a martial master in just a few months. Once he picked up more advanced techniques, he became one of the most formidable martial artists in the Yongho. But what if he were to study high-level martial arts right from the beginning? Seo might be able to accelerate the rise of the greatest swordsman in the Yongho by at least 30 years. Thinking of all that, Seo smiled and made up his mind. He would benefit as much as possible while working for him. He informed Director Kim that this was Murim, a realm of martial arts. This immediately caught Director Kim's attention. Seo told Director Kim that no one could predict when the gangs of the Yongho might target them if they launched a business, so shouldn't they at least learn basic self-defense? Director Kim's face lit up upon hearing the words martial arts. But he also knew they didn't teach outsiders their martial arts. So he asked Seo how they would manage to learn. Seeing his enthusiasm, Seo smiled, because as a well-known Murim novel nerd, he already knew Director Kim would be curious. He explained to Director Kim that in this city, there are 7 renowned sections. Among them, the demon-slaying sect, self-binding temple, suppressing birdhouse, and the 7 mysteries sect belong to the orthodox side of the Yongho. Meanwhile, the Wolf Fang Gang, the Dark Knight Association, and the Dragon Fighting Stronghold are seen as unorthodox. The people refer to them as the 4 stars and the 3 demons. The demon-slaying sect primarily trains in sword and blade techniques. The self-binding temple is a Buddhist sect, while the suppressing birdhouse resembles the house sect. They focus on intelligence gathering. The 7 mysteries sect has an ancient legacy and teaches a variety of martial arts. On the other hand, not much is widely known about the 3 demons. It's said they specialize in stealth skills and sorcery, and are involved in many unlawful activities. After finishing his explanation, Seo asked Director Kim which sect appealed to him most. Without a moment's hesitation, Director Kim picked the demon-slaying sect, adding that a martial artist should wield a sword, and a man ought to master blade techniques. Hearing that decision, Seo thought it was only fitting for the man once hailed as the greatest swordsman in his previous life. But Director Kim was puzzled and asked Seo how he knew all of this. Seo chuckled and told Director Kim that he had overheard some martial artists talking earlier. Then, 3 months later, Seo and Director Kim headed to the demon-slaying sect. But the guards blocked them, asking what their purpose was. Seo introduced Director Kim as his elder brother and told the guards that they had heard about the fame of the demon-slaying sect and had come hoping to learn martial arts. The guard of the demon-slaying sect was a strict, muscular man. He glanced at Seo and Director Kim's clothing and assumed they appeared to have a reasonable amount of money. But he told Director Kim that training in martial arts at his age would be challenging. Seo laughed and handed over a silver coin to the guard, asking if he could at least allow them to speak with someone of higher authority, adding that even basic self-defense training would suffice. Like that, by bribing the guard, Seo and Director Kim managed to enter the demon-slaying sect. Inside, they met one of the sect's elders. The elder asked if they were interested in learning martial arts merely for self-defense. Seo responded that they wished to learn the best techniques available, offering a box filled with silver nuggets. Upon seeing all those silver nuggets, the elder accepted, saying he supposed they could be allowed to join as external disciples. But after taking the silver, he added that no special treatment was given to those who entered through donations, and furthermore, they would only accept one of them. Hearing that, Seo was stunned because all that silver was worth just 1 yellow bamboo root, and that was all they were willing to offer. Surprised, Director Kim tried to question the elder if they were being scammed, but before he could say anything further, Seo accepted the elder's terms and thanked him, adding that his brother would be the one receiving the training. Upon hearing that, Director Kim was truly shocked. Then, as they were leaving, the elder asked Director Kim to come out later to the area where all the external disciples gathered. As they walked away, Director Kim asked Seo what was the point if only he would be learning martial arts. He said he might have picked a different faction had he known they'd be that costly. Seo turned back with a grin and told Director Kim not to worry about it, saying it's not like he had ever excelled at sports anyway. He told Director Kim he'd just start a business with the leftover money and support him, so he should simply focus on mastering martial arts. Director Kim was taken aback by that. He couldn't believe how much Seo was giving up for his sake. He told Seo that he would do his best, but Director Kim still had doubts because of his age and wasn't sure if he could truly accomplish much. Seo encouraged him to believe in himself that he was capable. Director Kim thanked Seo and went to train with the outer disciples. Then, 7 months later, during a competition held inside the sect, all the elders of the demon-slaying sect were both shocked and furious at the sight before them. In just 7 months, Director Kim had defeated every one of their disciples. The elders were enraged, demanding to know how some outsider from nowhere had managed to overcome all their prized disciples in such a short time. The demon-slaying sect was thrown into chaos. To master a martial art means to grasp the true essence that the martial art carries and to physically align oneself with it. A third-rate fighter who understands the essence of a martial art can rise to second-rate if they absorb it into their personal comprehension. To move beyond that, one requires more than double the depth of understanding as before, alongside equal time and effort. Yet sometimes, individuals blessed with talent seem to mock normal levels of understanding and leap through multiple stages at once. The demon-slaying sect is filled with such gifted warriors, the renowned sect of Seo-kyong City. But an outsider has arrived to challenge the prime disciples of that noble sect. In just 7 months, Director Kim became a top-tier warrior who had fully mastered the absolute dragon saber technique of the demon-slaying sect. The Grand Elder was enraged upon witnessing Director Kim, for he knew it was unthinkable to reach first-rate with just 6 months of training. First-rate level is a rank achievable only through the combined dedication of many elite martial artists. Furthermore, Director Kim was an outsider learning within their sect. To many, it felt like their traditions had bowed to a single man. The Grand Elder instantly commanded the sect guards to seize Director Kim, and so, he was captured and confined in a house watched by hundreds of guards. But now, even Seo was taken. He understood that since an outsider had acquired skills worthy of a sect elder within 7 months, the entire sect was thrown into chaos. In such an absurd scenario, Director Kim was locked in his quarters, suspected of being a spy from a rival sect. Still, Seo couldn't grasp why he too was seen as suspicious, especially when he didn't even practice martial arts. Seo questioned Director Kim, who was refining his sword moves, if he felt concerned. Director Kim chuckled and asked Seo what exactly he should be afraid of. Seo brought up the fact that they were labeling him as a spy. In martial arts stories, they often destroy a person's core or even sever their internal flow. Director Kim agreed that it was true, but added that somehow, he felt like he was nearing another wall, and if he overcame it, he was confident he'd rise to the next level. Seo was stunned upon hearing this and asked what kind of monster Director Kim truly was. It hadn't even been long since he had reached the first-rate level, and now he was already close to advancing again. Seo understood that the martial peak came after reaching first-rate. It was the stage where most great sect leaders or high elders resided. In Yenghua, they were referred to as absolute masters, and only about 1,000 of them existed across the entire nation. The martial world never speaks of any level beyond that. So, martial peak is regarded as the ultimate realm achievable through martial arts alone. Seo realized his assumptions were off. At this speed, the world's strongest swordsman would appear 40 years earlier, not just 30. 7 days passed, and Seo along with Director Kim were still being held captive. But even during that time, Director Kim wasn't idle. He kept training and meditating without rest. After 7 days, all the chi he accumulated transformed into 3 blooming energy lotus flowers. Director Kim inhaled their essence directly through his mouth. Seo was stunned to witness the lotuses, for he recognized them as chi flowers that manifested only to masters at the martial peak, and 3 of them had gathered at once. After fully drawing in that chi energy, Director Kim stood and told Seo that he had broken through the barrier, and he no longer feared the leader of the demon-slaying sect. Hearing those words, Seo let out a laugh and admitted that Director Kim's talent far surpassed anything he had imagined. Director Kim smiled and told Seo that even he was amazed by himself. He had never imagined he possessed such talent. He wondered if this was the reason he had always enjoyed martial arts stories as a kid. Just then, an elder from the demon-slaying sect entered with several guards and declared, "Here arrives Jim Yong-hun along with his ally." The elder unfolded a scroll and announced they had orders from the sect leader to destroy the chi core of the so-called spy who had stolen their sect's martial arts. Hearing this, Director Kim glared at the elder in fury, while Seo panicked and tried to speak up. "We're not spies. We were only..." But before Seo could finish, the elder struck him in the face and shouted at him to stay quiet, claiming they'd heard them speaking in a coded language. He commanded the guards to hold them down. But before they could move, Director Kim drew his sword and, in a flash, sliced off the elder's hand. The elder was stunned by the sudden move and lost grip of his own weapon. Director Kim aimed his sword at the elder and declared that this was the first sect he had ever joined, and he was no spy. However, a guard from behind didn't listen and lunged to strike Director Kim. Before his blade could reach, Director Kim dashed with blinding speed and severed the hands of every guard in the chamber. Watching that unfold, all the guards turned and began fleeing. Understanding that he was a martial artist at the peak level, they rushed off to notify the sect leader at once. Seeing them flee, Director Kim turned to Seo and said he planned to visit other sects for training, then asked what Seo intended to do. Seo instantly responded that he would go with Director Kim and proposed they head to the famed unorthodox sect, the Dragon Fighting Stronghold. Upon hearing this, Director Kim chuckled and told Seo to go on ahead, assuring him they would meet there, but not before he dealt with the pursuit of the sect leader and elders. A few hours later, high up in the Dragon Fighting Stronghold's rugged mountain terrain, Director Kim stood atop a cliff with his sword and asked Seo why he was so late. Seo, panting hard after the long climb, laughed and said it was simply because Director Kim was too fast. While conversing with Director Kim, Seo's gaze was fixed on the blood-soaked sword in Kim's hand. Looking at it, Seo recalled how Director Kim used to scold him for being violent not too long ago. But even if it was for survival, this world had turned them into something different. Seo silently wished they could return, not to this brutal martial realm, but back to an ordinary life on Earth. If given the chance to regress, Seo only wanted to return to Earth. With all those thoughts, Seo continued climbing the mountain, following behind Director Kim. He understood there was no turning back now. Since they were here, they had to do what was necessary. After the betrayal from the demon-slaying sect, Director Kim seized control of the Dragon Fighting Stronghold. 2 years later, he traveled across all regions of Yenghua, defeating sect after sect. By the 3rd year, he had successfully shattered the emblems of every last sect. He became renowned as the greatest martial artist beneath the heavens and used his legendary status to unify the sects under the martial alliance. 7 years passed, and by then, Director Kim and Seo shared a bond as close as brothers, ignoring the difference in age. Director Kim developed a martial art uniquely tailored for Seo and handed him the manual, saying, "This is the Severing Mountain Sword." Seo accepted the book and began reading it intently. Director Kim explained that he gave it that name with the hope Seo would carry on its will, a will powerful enough to slice through mountains. He believed that if Seo mastered the Severing Mountain Sword, he could eventually reach martial peak. As Seo read the manual, he was taken aback. Aside from what Director Kim had already told him, the Dragon Vein Chi method crafted alongside it was true first-rate martial arts. Unlike any second- or third-rate techniques, it was an immensely powerful method, and Seo immediately began training in it. But there was one major issue. Even after trying, Seo failed to learn it and would collapse instantly during practice sessions with Director Kim. Witnessing that, Director Kim told Seo bluntly that he truly lacked talent. Indeed, Seo's potential was incredibly poor. Despite receiving personal guidance and a martial art custom-made by the greatest martial artist alive, Seo barely reached the third-rate level, and that too after a full year of effort. A year later, Seo admitted that it couldn't be helped. He told Director Kim that perhaps he had some talent in medicine. After all, everyone has strengths in different areas. Then one day, a full decade later, Seo witnessed something truly astonishing. He saw Director Kim meditating, with 5 radiant chi flower orbs forming above his head. Seo was in awe, for this was a realm he had only read about in ancient tales, the convergence of 5 energies to the origin. All at once, Director Kim's entire body began to emit powerful internal chi. His joints and bones cracked loudly, and the surrounding energy shifted drastically as his white hair of age reverted to jet black. It was a divine spectacle. Director Kim's body undergoing complete transformation, radiating such energy that even standing nearby became unbearable. Once everything settled, Seo looked forward and was stunned by what he saw. Director Kim, now reborn as a young man, chuckled and asked Seo what had left him so astonished. His voice, his features, and his physique had completely changed into that of a young man. "This is known as skeletal restructuring," he said. Stunned, Seo called Director Kim brother. joking that he now looked even younger than him. Director Kim laughed and asked if he truly appeared that way. He said he felt overflowing with vitality, as though nothing was beyond his reach. Seo remarked that the world would be stunned once they saw his complete transformation. While putting on his robe, Director Kim replied, "Certainly." He walked up to Seo and said it was about time to pass down the leadership of the Murim Alliance. But Seo knew that there wasn't anyone who had gained Director Kim's recognition. Director Kim agreed and said the Murim Alliance leader, by its nature, needed to possess a strong martial foundation, but not one individual truly grasped the essence of martial arts. Seo chuckled and told Kim that was because he wasn't normal. Where else would you find a genius like him? Director Kim glanced out the window at the disciples' training and said that regardless, someone had to be found. Seo insisted once more that there simply weren't any worthy candidates. Then, 25 years later, inside a building at the heart of the Murim Alliance, Seo was calmly writing with a brush. 35 years had gone by since he had begun his second life in Dongsung. His hair had turned silver gray, as he was now well into his mid-60s. These days, he often wondered where the youthful Director Kim was and what he might be doing now. A year after undergoing his transformation, Director Kim had passed down the role of Murim Alliance leader to the next generation and stepped away. Seo had wanted to retire with him at that time, but to stabilize the disorderly Murim Alliance, he remained as its chief strategist for many more years. Director Kim had told Seo that he wished to roam the martial world and explore the entire Yen Kingdom. Maybe because of that, he didn't even show up at Seo's retirement ceremony. Old Seo stepped out of his room for a breath of fresh air. Looking around his home, he felt a deep sense of loneliness. He had purchased the house with enthusiasm using his retirement funds, but now it felt too large for one man to live in. That was the real issue. While pondering those thoughts, he suddenly heard rustling sounds from the bushes. Becoming cautious, he moved closer to investigate, only to be shocked at the sight of Director Kim standing there, wearing tattered clothes. Seo asked Director Kim what was with his ragged appearance and why he hadn't even attended the retirement ceremony. "Where have you been all this time?" Director Kim laughed faintly and collapsed to the ground. Seeing his condition, Seo quickly asked if something had gone wrong. Looking up at the sky, Director Kim told Seo that he had truly believed he was blessed with martial prowess. Sitting beside him, Director Kim asked, "Isn't that right? If I'm not a genius, then what else could I be?" He continued, "I am without a doubt a martial arts prodigy. Perhaps in this entire Yen Kingdom, or among folks like me, no one rivals my martial talent." Hearing Director Kim refer to himself as an ordinary person, Seo was confused and asked how he could possibly be ordinary. Who under heaven doesn't know you're the number one in the world? But before Seo could finish speaking, Director Kim interrupted with a heavy voice and said he had battled those cultivators. Did Seo remember them? Those monsters from 35 years ago who had kidnapped their comrades and soared through the skies? Seo, who had lived through that era twice, instantly remembered and was stunned to realize they were cultivators. He knew such beings rarely revealed themselves openly, instead operating from the shadows, embedded deep within the Yen imperial family and influencing the kingdom itself. After the Murim Alliance was founded and began gaining influence within the Yen kingdom, those cultivator factions started interfering seriously. Director Kim was displeased by this, but to oppose them meant going against the kingdom itself. To shield the Murim Alliance, they had no option but to comply. For that reason, Director Kim relinquished his leadership role in the Murim Alliance. As a mere mortal, he traveled across the Yen kingdom, seeking them out alone to stand against them. Director Kim explained to Seo that finding cultivators was extremely difficult. Even when he did find one and tried to confront them, they dismissed him outright, saying he wasn't worth their time. Then they would vanish using illusion techniques or flying skills, leaving no chance to counter. But 5 years earlier, he finally managed to fight a cultivator. Upon hearing this, Seo's eyes lit up, and he eagerly asked if he had won the battle. Director Kim replied calmly that yes, he had. Upon hearing that, Seo chuckled and told Director Kim that if he had done such a thing during his time as Murim Alliance leader, he would have dragged him by the collar. But while shaking hands, Director Kim said he had fought desperately against a cultivator who had reached the chi condensation realm, and he barely managed to graze his fingertip. Seo was left stunned. Director Kim then told him the cultivator had said, "If you can even touch my body, I'll count that as your win." So technically, he did win. But Director Kim still felt disappointed. Seo then asked if that cultivator from the chi condensation realm was one of the 10 great masters from the cultivation world or someone of similar standing. Director Kim shook his head and explained that the cultivator had said his level was just the second lowest in the cultivation hierarchy. In martial terms, he was merely second-rate. Seo stood there in disbelief. He couldn't wrap his head around what he was hearing and asked what kind of nonsense this was. In both his current and past lives, Seo had known cultivators to be terrifyingly powerful. But Yonghun's martial arts clearly defied limits. He was someone who could walk on air using skywalking, and slice through ancient steel and buildings like they were soft tofu. Yet, a genius like him could only manage to scratch the fingertip of someone near the bottom of the cultivation ladder? With visible disappointment, Director Kim said, "I was like a frog trapped in a well. We can never stand up to cultivators. They're like unstoppable natural disasters." Hearing this, Seo began sweating. Director Kim's words truly frightened him. But then, Director Kim pulled a hand out of his pocket and told Seo that today he had managed to cut the wrist of that cultivator. Hearing this, Seo brightened up and asked whether that meant his martial skills had surpassed the cultivator's. But Director Kim shook his head and told Seo that the cultivator had simply used a talisman, and his hand regenerated. With that, Director Kim stood up and told Seo that perhaps his martial journey had come to an end. Stunned, Seo quickly asked what he meant by that. Director Kim told Seo that he had come to bid farewell. With a chuckle, he said, "That person said he admired my determination and would accept me into his cultivation sect. I'll probably begin as the youngest disciple." Hearing that, Seo asked if becoming a cultivator meant gaining immortality. And wasn't it said that only those born with spiritual roots could cultivate? Director Kim explained that for an ordinary person, the stage known as 5 energies converging to the origin was equivalent to the 5 elemental spiritual root that natural cultivators were born with. He explained to Seo that in order to acquire the trait that cultivators are naturally born with, mortals like them must dedicate their entire lives to simply awaken that basic foundation. As he spoke, Director Kim swung his blade and tore open the fabric of space itself, forming a glowing door in midair. While stepping through that portal, he turned to Seo and said that he must now aim for greater heights. Before disappearing, he handed Seo a book, saying, "This is my final gift to you." He told Seo to stay well, and vanished before Seo could utter a word. Seo looked at the book's title, Record of Transcending Cultivation and Exhausting Martial Arts. It was a manual, a record of one man's attempt to reach beyond cultivation through martial prowess. Worried, Seo gazed up into the sky and softly asked, "Where are you going, Director Kim, without me?" But no answer came, and the days continued on. 50 years had now passed since Seo arrived in this world, and once again, he was on his deathbed, from a common cold. Such was fate. No matter how fiercely humans fight, they cannot defy destiny. In the end, nothing really changed except the bed and house in which he lay. He passed away on the exact same day as in his former life. This time he had lived without holding back, hoping to avoid the same regrets from before. He was so absorbed in his duties that he had never even considered marriage. Still, thanks to that drive, he had united all of Yengua's martial sects and experienced worldly fame and riches. But even so, a hollow emptiness remained in his heart. He wondered, if we had pushed even harder, could Director Kim and I have broken through to the sky itself? Seo's frail body trembled beneath the weight of such regret. It was too painful to accept. And so, the curtain fell on Seo's second life. After dying for the second time, Seo's vision, which had blurred just moments earlier, opened once more. He glanced around and realized he was in the same forest along the ascension path. Looking down, he noticed his body pulsing with energy. Seeing that, he understood regression wasn't merely a one-time event. As he drifted deeper into thought, all of a sudden, Section Chief John charged at Seo in rage, yelling, Deputy Manager CO, you bastard. But as John swung his arm to slap him, CO quickly responded and avoided the blow. John kept trying to hit him, but CO easily evaded every attempt. He didn't even seem concerned about John. He remained absorbed in thought, questioning, why was I brought back? A new body full of energy and another chance seemed like a blessing. But what about the life he had spent 50 years building? Meanwhile, John grew more exhausted. Still lashing out, he screamed that CO had nearly gotten them all killed, and now dared to dodge. Yet CO said nothing. He kept asking himself, is this truly a blessing? Deep down, he knew it wasn't. This was a curse, a cruel fate that robbed his life of purpose. A few regressions might feel like luck, but if this cycle were eternal, he'd be trapped in the wheel of fate, doomed to suffer endlessly. And he'd never reunite with those from his past life. The people here were merely copies of the ones he had cherished. Director Kim, who once felt like an older brother, was no longer part of this reality. Seeing John stumbling and utterly worn out, Director Kim finally stepped forward, saying to Section Chief John, that's enough. CO then asked John to calm down, saying, what good will anger do here? Hearing that, John grew even more furious, calling CO shameless. But before he could continue, CO interrupted again. To begin with, John, it was your turn to drive today. I warned you earlier, before you made me drive, that I hadn't slept last night due to the extra work you pushed onto me. CO turned to walk away and asked John, how could I have avoided an avalanche on such a narrow road? He told John to stop blaming others and instead focus on what should be done next. John was left speechless. He was used to CO always taking the blame and saying sorry. CO then faced Director Kim and accidentally called him by name, as he had in his former life, but quickly corrected himself. He told Director Kim he'd search for shelter before sunset and asked the rest to look for the car or any possible route out of the forest. When the sun sets, I'll light a fire, so come back to it. CO was no longer trying to impress anyone. He wasn't interested in forming bonds because deep down, he understood what's the use of connecting with people who would vanish again. In the end, he'd remain alone. As dusk fell, CO lit the fire. After the group searched for the car, they returned and spotted the fire. CO seated quietly beside it, others fast asleep. But CO stayed awake, his eyes filled with fear. He feared the endless cycle of regression, the infinite loop trapping him. He believed this ability needed to be erased and wondered if it would disappear if he ever reached Earth again. But since he always regressed to this very moment on the ascension path, he had no idea how to return. He recalled what the old cultivator had told him. When the ascension gate opens, nearby dimensions destabilize. Ordinary humans might get caught in those spatial storms. Understanding that the ascension gate truly existed, he felt it had to be tied to their fall into this world. And maybe, just maybe, it could be the key to returning home. He decided that first he must grow stronger. As an ordinary mortal, he couldn't accomplish anything. He needed to become a cultivator like Director Kim and start cultivating. Once he gained a longer lifespan through cultivation, he would be able to research the ascension gate properly. CO came out of the cave at night, and while looking at the sky, he decided that he would become a cultivator and go to the ascension gate. The next day, as the sun rose, CO left the cave and ventured into the forest. He went to the same place where he had previously found those 1,000-year-old ginsengs. He dug out as many as he could and began eating them immediately without stopping. By eating them, CO could feel strong quakes within his core. In his previous life, he hadn't known any heart methods, so eating these yellow bamboo roots would have done nothing. But using the dragon vein chi method that Director Kim had made for him, he could break through the blocked chi passageways. CO's heart, which had been extremely polluted, slowly began to cleanse itself. It started beating like it had when he was born. CO began sweating heavily as he cultivated, but he understood. It wasn't easy to heal a body soaked in preservatives, fast food, and stress. He didn't give up and continued. After eating those ginsengs, he went to train his body. He took a tree branch and, using rocks, carefully carved it into the shape of a sword. Looking at the somewhat sword-like stick CO thought that should do the work. He started swinging his sword. Remembering the training he had done in his previous life with Director Kim, he recalled his footwork and the way he used to swing his blade. In his past life, he had only been an average second-rate martial artist. And since he hadn't practiced near the end of his life, his skills had dulled. Of course, he wasn't completely helpless. He swung his wooden sword at a nearby tree using the Severing Mountain Sword first form. With just a wooden sword, Seo cut into the tree and created a deep mark. He could do this because the martial arts from his previous life were still all in his head. So improving his skills was just a matter of time. But unknown to him, his sword practice had been seen by Director Kim, who had wandered into the forest. Director Kim was utterly shocked and called out from behind, asking, "What was that just now?" He ran up to Seo, asking, "How did you slash a tree with a wooden stick? Just what is that strength?" Seeing how excited Director Kim was, Seo smiled and sighed, thinking, "This is the man who will instruct me to become a cultivator." Seo turned to Director Kim and asked if he wanted to try learning this technique. Hearing that, Director Kim's face lit up with excitement. He asked Seo, "Can I really do it?" But before Seo could reply, something suddenly appeared and destroyed the tree where Seo had been practicing. It was none other than the nine-tailed fox. The nine-tailed fox glared at them angrily and shouted, "Filthy humans! How dare you play around in front of the master of this forest?" Seeing the nine-tailed fox, Director Kim was completely stunned. And not just him, even Seo grew very nervous. He had completely forgotten about the nine-tailed fox. In his second life, the nine-tailed fox had mercilessly bitten off Seo's arm. At that moment, he knew the only thing he could do now was endure. As the fox tore apart his arm, he slightly eased its pain by applying pressure to his own acupoint because he knew he was weak. In his first life and even in his second, he was weak. But now, in this third life, as the nine-tailed fox appeared before him, Seo took a deep breath and walked toward it. Scared, everyone called out to Seo from behind, telling him not to go there. But Seo didn't listen to them and continued toward the nine-tailed fox. Even now, in his third regression, he still didn't know how his second life had ended up that way. In his previous life, Seo had decided to become a cultivator after reaching the five-path core. But even after learning martial arts under the best master for over 100 years, he was barely considered a second-rank mastery warrior. Seo grabbed one arm with the other and used his strength to cut off his own arm, because he knew that compared to the people gathered here, his talent was trash. Seeing Seo cut off his own arm, everyone was shocked and terrified. Seo offered the severed arm to the nine-tailed fox to eat, because whether it took 1,000 years or 10,000, he was determined not to give up. Seeing him willingly offer his own arm, the nine-tailed fox laughed and said, "Human, you know your place. You know how to offer yourself as a sacrifice." The nine-tailed fox then decided to have a taste of Seo's arm. Hearing that, Seo silently resolved to offer his arm to the fox until the day he surpassed its strength. After the fox ate his arm, it allowed them to stay and then disappeared. Seo didn't care about the others. He simply went to a quiet place in the forest and kept swinging his sword. After a few days, the cultivators healed his arm and escorted his colleagues away. But Seo didn't eat, sleep, or rest. He kept swinging his sword. The only reason he stopped swinging on the fourth day was because the Sea Dragon King arrived. Seo greeted the Sea Dragon King with respect and said, "This lowly mortal dares to ask the Sea Dragon King a question." Seeing how respectful Seo was, the Sea Dragon King allowed him to speak. Seo asked, "It seems the Sea Dragon King wishes to take Miss O. But Miss O is just an ordinary person without spiritual roots, and ordinary humans cannot live longer than 100 years. What are your intentions toward her?" Hearing that, the Sea Dragon King laughed and said Seo was quite an observant mortal, someone who understood the state of cultivators well. But he told them not to worry, because once Miss O accepted his blood, she would awaken spiritual roots suitable for her. Seo was surprised to hear that and asked the Sea Dragon King if perhaps he could give them a chance as well, since Miss O was from the same hometown and maybe they too might possess some hidden ability. Hearing that, the Sea Dragon King smiled and told Seo to listen carefully. Just as he said that, Seo felt an overwhelming pressure on his chest and collapsed to the ground. The Sea Dragon King said, I will say one thing out of concern. Do not carelessly express your opinions to a high-ranking cultivator like me. We have lived for hundreds or even thousands of years. We see what mortals cannot see. We know what mortals do not know. He looked at Seo with glowing green eyes and continued. You have a good temperament, so I'll let it slide. But there are cruel ones who, just because your eyes met theirs, would tear you apart like insects and kill you. Saying that, the Sea Dragon King walked out of the cave with Miss O, then transformed into his dragon form and flew back into the sky. Seeing the Sea Dragon King's true form, Director Kim was completely shocked. The next day, as the weather cleared and everyone came out of the cave, they encountered the old cultivator riding the mechanical lion. As the old cultivator appeared, Seo stepped forward, greeted him and asked, Our colleague, Miss Kim, is just an ordinary person without spiritual roots, so how could she possibly become your disciple? Hearing that, the old cultivator laughed and took out an elixir, telling Seo that it was a very precious elixir capable of opening spiritual channels. If one took it, even an ordinary person might gain the chance to become immortal. Seo was shocked to hear that there was another way to become a cultivator. The old cultivator explained that it was possible for mortals to reach the realm of the five-path core by pushing their martial arts to the extreme. But that path took too long, and the results were unsatisfactory. So this method was the best. After telling them everything, the old cultivator opened a portal to the mortal world and sent them into it, saying both of them were useless to him now, so they should get lost. Both Seo and Director Kim fell into the teleportation portal, and Miss Kim could only watch them disappear, screaming. Seo lost consciousness there, and the next time he opened his eyes, he found himself hanging from a tree branch above the ground. He looked ahead and saw a vast forest with some buildings in the middle. Seeing that, Seo realized that this was the southwestern root army of the Yen Kingdom, his past life. Just like in the second regression, he had wandered all over the Yen Kingdom with Director Kim. Having traveled the Yen Kingdom for over 100 years, there were almost no places he didn't know now. Seo climbed down from the tree and woke up Director Kim. After waking him up, both of them headed toward a nearby castle. Seo explained the situation to Director Kim, who seemed flustered, but likely because so much had happened already, he accepted most of it. A few days later, they arrived at the nearest Tiger Wall Castle. There, they sold herbal medicine from the Immortal Ascending Village and bought a house. Seo began teaching Director Kim how to write and speak the language, as well as how to use the Severing Mountain Blade, which Director Kim had originally created in his second regression. Seo then modified the Severing Mountain Sword to better suit the weapon Kim used. Seo felt a bit disappointed with himself as he watched Director Kim, because Director Kim had reached the Three Blossoms Crown Peak only 3 months after starting martial arts training, while someone like Seo had spent 2 entire lifetimes just training and had barely reached the first rate. After Director Kim reached peak level, he got excited and said, If it's now, I think I could even beat you. Hearing that, Seo smiled, realizing that the man in front of him was not the same big brother he once served in a past life. This Director Kim was mentally much younger than Seo in terms of how long he had lived. He was now old enough to be Director Kim's grandfather. So, Seo decided that he shouldn't stay with him in this life. He gave Director Kim martial arts cultivation scrolls and the exhausting record of transcending, a book Kim had created in his previous life. He told Director Kim that from today onwards, he would be going his own way. Hearing that, Director Kim was shocked and asked, What do you mean by that? Did I make a mistake? Is that why you're leaving? What's the reason? When Director Kim asked about the reason, Seo remembered what had happened in his first regression. Director Kim had become the Martial Alliance leader, but fell into despair after losing to the cultivators. The second regression wasn't all that different. Director Kim developed the record of transcending cultivation and exhausting martial arts, and later created the record of martial arts surpassing through cultivation. He battled against the cultivators, but eventually, a more powerful one overwhelmed him, and he collapsed. After that defeat, Director Kim vanished, saying he would pursue the path of cultivation, leaving martial arts behind. And Seo thought perhaps this life would follow the same ending. But this time, he didn't want to witness his brother Kim falling into that same hopelessness again. So Seo gave an excuse, telling Director Kim that he wished to travel alone and hone his abilities. Hearing that, Director Kim asked if Seo couldn't train alongside him, questioning how he was supposed to go on without him. Seo told Director Kim that with his current martial arts prowess, he should be able to live just fine. Seo reminded him that he'd already taught him how to read, write, and even fight. Now that Kim had become a top-level master, there was no reason to worry. Still, Director Kim wasn't fully convinced. He asked Seo if he really had to leave his childhood companions behind once again. Seo was caught off guard by that. So he proposed that, starting today, they meet at this house once every 2 years. Director Kim, hearing that, finally agreed. After comforting the lonely Director Kim, Seo left the house and went on his way. Not long after, a disciple from the 8th Stronghold Pavilion appeared and asked, "What's going on in front of the 8th Stronghold Pavilion?" The man he questioned was Seo. Seo greeted him and told the disciple that he had come to formally request a duel at the 8th Stronghold Pavilion. Hearing this, the disciple laughed and said, "This isn't a place where random strangers can just show up." But before the disciple could finish speaking, Seo drew his sword and slashed, destroying the disciple's blade in one swift motion, stunning everyone nearby. After slicing the weapon, Seo asked him, "Do I still seem like a nobody to you?" Seo had made up his mind. He was fully determined that this time, he would become truly powerful. After challenging the 8th Stronghold Pavilion and slicing through the disciples' blades, Seo was invited into the pavilion. Upon entering, a girl arrived to guide him. She politely asked him to come to the inner quarters, saying the sect leader awaited him. Seo followed her into the inner quarters, where she guided him to an arena where the sect leader stood. The spectators were disciples of the 8th Stronghold Pavilion. As the sect leader noticed him, he smiled and remarked that he was eager to see who this first-rate master was, especially one so young. Seo bowed to the sect leader, saying, "This humble one, Seo Yoon Hyun, offers greetings to the sect leader of Paleongak." At that, the sect leader laughed and praised Seo's remarkable energy. Seo likewise praised the sect leader, saying his energy was equally exceptional, and asked to receive his guidance. The sect leader then drew his weapon, a spear whip. He swung the spear whip and informed Seo that he would strike first. Seo unsheathed his sword. The sect leader moved swiftly and aimed at Seo's legs, but Seo swiftly dodged the strike. Yet it was merely a feint, not the sect leader's true strike. As Seo dodged and hovered midair, the sect leader charged energy into the spear whip and struck. His attack targeted Seo's head, taking him by surprise, but Seo shifted his sword with lightning reflexes and cleanly deflected the blow. The disciples of the 8th Stronghold Pavilion were stunned to witness their sect leader's spear whip being blocked by a sword. Observing Seo's reflexes, the sect leader was impressed and said, "Young warrior, you have attained the state of sword-body unity and are in the late stage of first rate." Seo returned the praise, commending the sect leader for fully harmonizing with martial arts, saying that it allowed him to witness a new technique. The sect leader laughed and told Seo that being at the same level as him at such a young age truly made Seo a genius. Hearing the sect leader call him a genius, Seo chuckled because to him, being called a genius was not a compliment. It might seem surprising that someone who looked to be in his late 20s had achieved a level that generally required decades of training. Seo gave a small smile and thanked the sect leader for complimenting his lacking talent, as he knew deep down he was just one among many average dullards in this world. Heaven had not gifted him with talent. But even as such a dullard, through regression, he had managed to refine his martial arts to a level akin to that of a true genius. Yet Seo believed that regression, perhaps, was both his ability and his blessing. And so, he made the decision to become a genius. He raised his sword at the sect leader and declared he would now unleash sword energy. The sect leader replied that he too would fight with full strength. Seo used the Duanhua sword art's first move and struck at the sect leader. The sect leader quickly moved to his right and dodged the attack, but Seo didn't give him any chance and used the second move, entering the mountain and attacking from below. The sect leader blocked his strike with the spear whip and moved back. Seo charged again and used the third move, ascending the vein to attack. The sect leader again blocked his attack. He then took a step back and unleashed his energy, infusing it into his spear whip to attack. He swung his spear whip with lightning speed and continuously attacked from many directions, trying to put pressure on Seo. But Seo didn't fall short and blocked all his attacks. The sect leader was shocked to see that and wondered, "What is this monstrous sword art that I can't break through?" The sect leader again aimed at Seo's legs, trying to shake his balance. But it was no use as Seo jumped and dodged again. While Seo was in midair, he used the Duanua sword's 7th move, Deed Mountain, and charged straight at the sect leader with incredible speed. It looked like Seo was attacking with thousands of swords, and the sect leader could not dodge. He barely managed to move slightly, but still got his cheek cut. Seeing that, the disciples of the 8th Stronghold Pavilion were shocked, saying, "This can't be!" Seo's sword speed was increasing with each move. Seo then used his 11th move, destroying the ground. The sect leader jumped and dodged the attack. The disciples were stunned to see that it wasn't just speed. The sword was gaining destructive power as well. Seo charged again and attacked with his energy-infused sword. The sect leader blocked Seo's sword with his energy-infused spear whip. The collision released a huge amount of energy. After taking Seo's attack head-on, the sect leader's hands began to shake. Seeing that, Seo decided to finish it here. He jumped high into the sky and used his 12th move, 7 Lights Emerging Peak. Seeing him, the sect leader also attacked. But Seo swung his energy-infused sword with such force and speed that it cut the sect leader's spear whip into thousands of pieces, completely shocking the sect leader. Not just him, all the disciples of the 8th Stronghold Pavilion were shocked to see it. Seo's attack not only cut down the sect leader's spear whip, but also cut his hand. The sect leader grabbed his hand in pain and declared that he conceded defeat. Hearing that, Seo immediately put away his sword and greeted the sect leader, saying it was a good opportunity. Then he left the arena. Their match had completely destroyed the arena. After defeating the sect leader of the 8th Stronghold Pavilion, Seo left the sect. As he was walking out, everyone looked at him in shock. It had been a very clean fight. Seo remembered that Paleongak was famous even in his previous life as a righteous sect that didn't engage in cowardly acts. So, he decided to try visiting a demonic sect next. Thinking through these martial arts duels, he resolved that in this life, he must reach the peak realm. As time passed slowly, Seo visited about 4 more small sects in Seong. Among them, he lost duels at Aol Yuba and Hyangman, and won against sects like Jubang and Yukibo. Then he went to Huangpa where he fought a warrior. He first cut down that warrior's blade and sent him flying. The warrior flew toward his sect master and was unconscious because of Seo's powerful attack. Seeing that, the sect leader of Huangpa laughed and said, "So, the young first-rate master who's been challenging people to duels all over Seong recently was you after all." He told Seo that he had witnessed his skill well. Seo greeted the sect leader, saying he too had learned a lot. Just then, many warriors came out of the door behind the sect leader. The sect leader asked Seo if he was ready, because now it was the turn of the 10 elders. Seeing that, Seo was surprised, wondering, "What is this? Is this the demonic sect's way?" He asked the sect leader, "Didn't the duel just end with my victory? I've never heard of continuous battles or a 10-on-1 duel." With a smirk, the sect leader said, "Didn't you just hear?" Hearing that, Seo realized that this guy was playing word games. He tried to scare the sect leader, saying that if he widely announced today's cowardice to other sects, Hodangpa's reputation would plummet. The sect leader laughed and told Seo that he didn't care, because Seo would get injured during the duel here, and that injury would flare up, causing him to die of tetanus. He told Seo that people would believe their sect had taken great care of him, and despite their best efforts, Seo had unfortunately passed away. As the 10 elders surrounded Seo, the sect leader laughed and told him, "How can a dead man spread a different rumor?" This situation was even more than Seo had expected. They were crazy bastards. All the elders pointed their swords at Seo. The sect leader told him that if they killed him here, it wouldn't affect their reputation. It sounded very dangerous, but Seo smiled because this was also why he had come here. He pulled out his sword and asked the sect leader to come at him, saying he would accept this absurd duel. All the elders charged at Seo, and from then on a real fight began. As the sun set over the Hodangpa region, the streets lit up with joy. People were enjoying their night, drinking at inns. A drunk man told his friend that he had heard the young master who had been challenging every sect to a fight had gone to duel Hodangpa this time, saying, "What a pity for such a young talent." His friend agreed, saying, "To challenge an illegal organization like the evil sect to a duel is just asking for death." Their third friend told them, "That's how it usually is, isn't it? When one is young, they believe the world will go their way." Something like that kind of innocence. A guy from another table stood up and said, "That young man just relied on his skill and acted rashly, bringing about his own death. The Hodongpa may seem like a sect on the outside, but inside it's no different from a bandit's den. He's probably buried by now." While they were talking, just then someone entered the inn wearing shoes soaked in blood. The waiter turned to welcome the new guest but was shocked when he saw him. It was Seo, completely soaked in blood, with small injuries all over his body. He ordered 1 bowl of noodles. Everyone in the inn was shocked to see him. The waiter nervously asked him to come in and sit down. Seo went to sit down, and as he passed by others, everyone lowered their heads, not daring to look him in the eyes. But it was a normal reaction because Seo had a very angry expression. He was angry at those crazy bastards of Hodongpa. He had really almost died. Not just in a 10-on-1 fight, but they had even cowardly poisoned their weapons and injured his back with them. It was a good thing Seo had learned top-tier medicine when he was a strategist for the Martial Alliance. If he hadn't taken the antidote pills and stimulants he had prepared beforehand, he would have died. He had killed all 10 of the elders. But then, in that crazy old man's final desperate act, he had shouted for his disciples to kill Seo somehow. All the miscellaneous soldiers of the sect, carrying spears and arrows, formed a battle formation and charged. Seo just fought like a beast, not caring about technique or anything else, just trying to survive. Even so, Seo survived. He cut the meridians of those who were still breathing, crippling them so they wouldn't come looking for revenge, and he killed their sect leader. While eating the noodles, he saw his hand shaking. Maybe because he had taken too many stimulants. The tension just wouldn't subside. He sighed, knowing he wouldn't be able to sleep for the next few days. He grabbed his sword again, knowing that he needed to have another duel with another orthodox sect. After eating, he walked out of the inn, showing everyone a large cut on his back. Everyone was so scared that they couldn't say anything. Seeing that the young master, after his fierce battle with Hodongpa, ate noodles and immediately left for another duel. That crazy young man was widely talked about among many people, making Seong City buzz with excitement. People gave that mad master a fitting nickname, the Infinite Fighting Monster. Seo Yoon-hyun. Seo was continuously fighting, knowing that he had no talent and that the path to the pinnacle he sought was infinitely distant. Therefore, he had to constantly fight and approach that realm by crossing the boundaries of life and death. Seo thought that a person without talent must go mad to overcome the wall. If there is no talent, there must be madness. That is the only way for a dullard to catch up to a genius. And so, Seo scoured Seong City and various parts of Yongguk, engaging in duels several times a day, regardless of whether they were orthodox or evil sects. And like that, 5 years passed. 5 years later, suddenly there was a blast in front of a house. It was Seo, who jumped into the air and used his mountain-breaking sword art's 14th form, Q Mountain Heartstream. He collected energy from nature. Its energy was like a mountain. His heart was like the heavens. But even just doing so, Seo started to struggle. The form of sword thread could only be used upon reaching the pinnacle. Just briefly manifesting it put an enormous strain on the mind. But he knew that if he didn't do it this way, he couldn't catch up. Just then, a black figure appeared behind Seo and came to attack. Seo turned and used his sword to block the figure's strike. But the attack was so powerful that cracks appeared in Seo's sword. He went flying, crashing to the ground and hitting a wall. The collision was so strong that it created a hole in the wall. In a single strike, all his sword energy was shattered. While laughing, the figure walked towards Seo and said, "Your reputation precedes you. I had quite high hopes, but you're still very clumsy, young master." the infinite fighting monster. That figure stepped out of the smoke and told Seo that he thought he had won. Seo was cautious, because his opponent was the greatest under heaven, Kim Yong-hoon. Seo was amazed by Director Kim's insane talent. He stood up and congratulated Director Kim, saying he had become even stronger than last year. Well, he was right, because Director Kim had completed his transformation in just 5 years. Looking at the cut marks on his own hands, Seo wondered what on earth he had done in those 5 years. His realm was still at the top tier. With a sad expression, Seo accepted that talent is truly something that makes a person miserable. Then, after they calmed down, he asked Director Kim what brought him here. Because hadn't they agreed to meet every 2 years? Director Kim told Seo that after attaining the 5 energies converging to the origin and visiting the great sects of Yango, he had realized one thing. Seo asked him what that was. Director Kim told Seo it was the fact that there was no one above him in Yongguk. Now, no one was even a match for a single one of his moves. And so, he was planning to create a sect or organization of some kind and wanted to offer Seo a seat. But Seo immediately declined, saying he was comfortable with his current state. Looking at Director Kim, Seo thought he seemed to have already developed martial lord's disease. He knew that if he accepted that offer in this life too, he would surely become something like a strategist or vice-sect leader, and work like a dog. But to reach the pinnacle with his level of talent, every minute and second was precious. Director Kim told him that it might be difficult to meet again once he established his organization. He then started persuading Seo, saying he could always stick around and get his guidance in duels. But Seo declined, telling Director Kim that no matter what offer he made, he was not going to take it. Hearing that, Director Kim grew very sad. It was a good offer from him, but Seo declined because he had already received plenty of teachings in his past life. What he needed now was real-life experience. In Seo's past life, Director Kim had told him that once he entered the late stages of first rate, he should endeavor to experience as much real combat as possible. So in this life, Seo decided to merely watch Director Kim's saga from afar, and continue on his own endless journey for battle. And so, another 20 years passed. On a rainy day, Director Kim arrived at the old house where Seo was waiting. He opened the old house door and told Seo that he looked pale. Seo had grown a little older, and there were many cut marks on his face. But most of all, he had a very depressing expression, because he had finally realized that his talent was a talent abandoned by the heavens. Seo sat cross-legged on the mat, his hand firmly gripping the hilt of a glowing blue sword. Despite his countless hours of relentless training, frustration clouded his expression. From across the room, Director Kim, with his long hair tied neatly at the back, looked at him and asked, "Have you still not broken through to the next realm?" Seo tightened his grip on the glowing sword, his eyes filled with determination. He acknowledged to himself that his understanding of sword chi had already far surpassed that of others in the league. Yet, despite his progress, he couldn't help but feel the sting of inadequacy. He still couldn't last beyond 3 moves against the high-rank masters. Director Kim placed a hand thoughtfully against his chin, his brows furrowing slightly. After a brief moment of contemplation, he muttered to himself, finding the situation unusual. "How strange," he thought. Director Kim observed Seo closely, noting the way he now moved as one with his sword, far more in tune than ever before. Yet, despite this progress, Seo still hadn't reached the peak realm. For someone with as much real combat experience as him, Director Kim thought it should have been more than enough to break through. A faint, self-mocking smile curved Seo's lips as sweat trickled down his face. He acknowledged the bitter truth. "This is my talent," he thought to himself. Blood trickled from Seo's nose as he forced a faint, bitter smile in his heart. He acknowledged the cruel truth. He possessed a talent that the heavens themselves had cast aside. Seo's grip on his sword tightened, his expression strained as blood trickled from his nose. Half a day, that was his limit. If only he could sustain his sword chi effortlessly from dawn till dusk without faltering. Perhaps then he might finally catch a glimpse of the path forward. Director Kim handed Seo a thick, red-bound book, his tone filled with sincerity. He expressed his genuine hope for Seo's success, then added as he passed it over. Seo sat reading the red-bound book, his expression thoughtful. Director Kim explained that it contained insights he had gained from his recent battle against cultivators. By enduring their spells and dragging the fight out for as long as possible, he had managed to hold on and ultimately escape. Seo weighed the thick, red-bound book in his hands. It was nearly as substantial as the main volume of the Record of Martial Arts surpassing through cultivation and leaps, an evolved version of the record of transcending cultivation and exhausting martial arts. With a doubtful look, he questioned Director Kim, wondering if he had truly gained so much insight merely from successfully escaping. Standing in the doorway with lightning flashing behind him, Director Kim spoke with a grave tone. To him, cultivators were like natural disasters in human form. Escaping from such a force was no small feat naturally. The insight gained from surviving such an ordeal would be immense. Seo assured Director Kim that he would keep the book safe and pass it on to future generations. With sincerity in his voice, Director Kim responded, thanking him. Standing at the entrance of the building with his sword in hand, Director Kim looked out into the storm. He declared his intention to seek out the cultivators once more. His voice steady despite the danger ahead, with a faint, almost grim smile. He added that he hoped they would both be alive the next time they met. Before leaving, Director Kim turned to Seo, his gaze steady despite the falling rain. He offered a final piece of advice for reaching the peak realm. Every scene, every space he passed through and experienced, Seo needed to engrave deeply into his mind, never letting those impressions fade. Seo's eyes widened in surprise as he processed Director Kim's words. Almost in disbelief, he echoed the thought aloud. Was he truly meant to imprint all the scenery around him into his mind? Director Kim explained further, likening the practice to how one instinctively takes note of the surrounding terrain during battle or sparring. Normally, a fighter would store the layout of their surroundings in their mind for tactical use. What he was suggesting, however, was to turn that skill into second nature, something he could do constantly, not just in the heat of combat. Seo's eyes widened in disbelief as he tried to grasp the enormity of the advice. Maintaining his sword alone already felt like it was about to make his head explode. And now, on top of that, he was being told to keep his spatial awareness sharp and steady at all times. The thought left him wondering how anyone could possibly manage such a feat. A wave of pressure and strain built inside Seo's mind, the thought gnawing at him relentlessly. If this keeps up, will my head really explode? He wondered, feeling the weight of the task pressing against his very limits. Seo shook his head firmly. There had to be a reason why the strongest martial artist under heaven had entrusted him with such a task. It wasn't meaningless. There was purpose behind the challenge. From that day forward, Seo committed himself to a new discipline. He made a conscious effort to remember every space that came into view, training his mind to retain every detail. Over time, he began to recall exactly where everything was. Seo moved through the bustling streets, the vibrant scene unfolding around him. Every detail, the flow of the crowd, the arrangement of buildings, the colors and sounds. He committed all to memory, sharpening his awareness with each passing moment. As Seo walked through the crowded streets, he paid attention even to the smallest details. The sound of footsteps against the tiled ground, the shuffle of shoes brushing past one another. Every movement and sound became a part of the mental map he was building. Passing through the dense forest, Seo noted the rustle of leaves and the way sunlight filtered through the canopy. Every sound, every flicker of movement in the greenery was etched into his memory as part of his growing awareness of the world around him. Seo walked steadily through the forest, his breaths deep and measured, sword in hand. It had been 5 years since he began the relentless practice of maintaining both his sword chi and his spatial awareness. 5 years of unbroken discipline and focus. Seo swayed slightly, a wave of dizziness washing over him. Perceiving every fragment of spatial information that entered his field of vision was exhausting. Far from an ordinary task, and certainly not an easy one, it demanded constant focus, pushing his mind to its limits. Seo realized his perception had grown sharper than ever before. It was no longer limited to visual information. Now, even the faintest sounds reached him with clarity. The rustling of leaves, the distant chirping of insects, the subtle crunch of footsteps. All of it became part of the world he was learning to perceive. A shadow of doubt crossed Sio's mind. Will I even be able to perform martial arts properly in this condition? He wondered. Yet he reminded himself that there were no more sects left to confront, at least for now. For nearly 3 decades, Sio journeyed across the entire Yen kingdom, challenging minor sects in sparring matches and, on occasion, testing his skills against the major ones. By now, there was hardly a sect in the kingdom that he hadn't visited. And now, Sio made his living by collecting bounties. His skills had brought him to the point where he was not only confronting outlaws but also capturing dangerous bandits with ease. In his dizzy state, he found himself forced to battle enemies who attacked without restraint, using any means or methods to kill. The thought gnawed at him. Could he truly survive under such relentless conditions? One of the bandits spotted him and shouted, "Brother!" "It's him." Another roared, "Found you, you bastard." But Sio remained calm, gripping his sword tightly. Either way, he thought, this is the path I've chosen. The towering bandit leader stepped forward, his broad frame draped in a leopard-patterned robe, eyes locked on Sio with murderous intent. Resting a massive blade on his shoulder, he sneered and pointed his second sword toward his target. "You're dead now," he roared, his voice rumbling through the forest as the other bandits closed in behind him. Sio steadied his breathing, sword chi swirling around him despite the pounding in his head. Even if I die, he thought, this is the path I've chosen. Facing the armed men before him, his grip tightened. Isn't this the path I must walk? Blood sprayed through the air as screams of agony pierced the forest. The clash had begun, and the carnage was instant. 15 years had passed. Sio, now aged and bearing a weathered face marked by deep lines, gazed forward with a solemn expression. His gruff voice carried the weight of years as he quietly asked, "Did you survive, Director Kim?" His long hair was tied neatly back, and a deep scar etched across his face met Sio's gaze with a warm smile. In a confident yet light-hearted tone, he replied, "This time, too." It had been 45 years since Sio had returned to this life. As he calmly poured tea, his thoughts reflected on the changes within him. By now, his vision and hearing were sharper than ever, leaving no room for doubt. Even his sense of touch, taste, and smell had reached a state of refined perception, honed to near perfection over the decades. Sio's gaze fell upon the steaming cup of tea before him. Despite all the refinements his senses had achieved over the decades, he knew in his heart. Sio's expression grew heavy, his eyes shadowed with the weight of regret. Even after all these years, he thought to himself, I still haven't become a master at the peak. Sio's eyes burned with fierce frustration, the weight of decades pressing down on him. The thought echoed relentlessly in his mind, rising into a silent roar. I still haven't. Director Kim sat across from Sio, a faint smirk playing on his lips as he sipped his drink. He explained that it seemed he had become wanted. Perhaps he had gotten a bit too famous among the cultivators. 2 of them, he continued, had even gone so far as to set a trap and lie in wait for him. Sio recounted his experience with a measured tone. He explained that he had barely managed to escape the ambush, though he did succeed in leaving a small cut on one of his attacker's cheeks. Looking toward Director Kim, he remarked that surely Kim must have gained valuable insight from this encounter as well. Director Kim scoffed at the idea of insight, dismissing it as nonsense. Placing his hand on the cup, he admitted that even now he still couldn't defeat a judgment stage Taoist. If he failed to escape in such a fight, he knew the outcome. He would end up as nothing more than a corpse lying on the ground. Director Kim tilted his head back slightly, his expression thoughtful as he confessed what had been weighing on his mind lately. He admitted that the extreme state of the 5-path core he had reached might, in fact, be the very end of the martial path itself. Director Kim reflected aloud, wondering if even the martial arts record Sio had first given him, the one that claimed martial arts could surpass cultivation, was perhaps flawed. He questioned if Seo had ever shared his own thoughts, that no matter how strong or skilled one became, martial arts alone could never truly defeat cultivators. For some reason, Seo found himself seeing a reflection of his own past and struggles in Kim Yong-hun. Seo observed that Kim Yong-hun clearly possessed a talent blessed by the heavens. In contrast, he reflected bitterly. He himself had been born with a talent abandoned by the heavens. Seo reflected that he and Kim Yong-hun possessed talents that were complete opposites. One blessed by the heavens, the other abandoned by them. Yet, despite this stark contrast, he couldn't help but wonder, why does he look so much like me? Seo admitted his frustration at not knowing why he couldn't reach the peak realm. Director Kim considered this and noted that even after mimicking Sword Chi and adopting the perspective of the peak realm, Seo still couldn't attain it, and he still had no idea why. Under the quiet night sky, Director Kim suggested having a sparring match for old time's sake. Seo responded with a faint smile, saying it was the best thing he had heard in a long while. The moon hung high in the night sky, casting a gentle silver glow over the quiet forest below, as if silently bearing witness to the coming clash. The stillness of the night was shattered by a deafening clash, the air erupting with explosive force as their battle began, sending shockwaves rippling through the trees under the moonlit sky. Seo staggered back, clutching his side as pain surged through him. Gritting his teeth, he shouted in frustration, "What the hell do you think the problem is?" Director Kim, standing with his sword in hand, admitted honestly that he didn't know the reason. By all rights, Seo should have become a peak master long ago. Blood dripped from Seo's mouth as he staggered, his voice sharp with confusion and urgency. "What do you mean? How strange. How bizarre. Why is this happening?" Director Kim wondered himself, struggling to comprehend. He said that even if Seo truly had no talent at all, this outcome still didn't make sense to him. Hearing that, Seo's eyes widened in shock and confusion. Director Kim placed a thoughtful hand on his chin, his gaze steady. "Perhaps what you're missing," he suggested, "is the right trigger." "Trigger." Seo repeated the word softly. Director Kim explained, "Something like desperation or a driving force. Something that could push you past the limits of your talent by drawing out extreme focus." Seo's rage exploded as he shouted, his voice echoing with decades of frustration. "What kind of damn trigger are you even talking about? I've wielded a sword for over 50 years. My whole life." Seo's eyes burned with fury and desperation as he roared. "And now you're telling me what kind of trigger do I still need to yearn for? And how much more desperately?" His voice trembled with raw emotion. "I've risked my life and struggled all my life just to escape mediocrity." Seo roared with fervent intensity, raising his sword high. "I've activated every meridian in my entire body. Now, even when I sleep, I hold my sword and release sword energy. Even in my dreams, I've reached the point where I process every bit of scenery and information I see." Seo collapsed to his knees, his voice breaking with anguish. "Then why? Why? Just why the hell? You're telling me the next realm won't reveal itself to me? Why? Why the hell not?" Seo lay sprawled on the ground, his sword cast aside, his breath ragged. Even he knew how pitiful it was for an old man nearly 70 to resent the heavens. His voice cracked with anguish. Just why? Even after a lifetime of chasing the sword, yearning for that elusive next realm, Seo's grasp remained empty. His fingers clawed into the dirt as he growled through clenched teeth. No matter how desperately he pursued it, he couldn't even begin to comprehend what that next realm truly was. Director Kim stood silently, sword in hand, gazing at Seo, who lay collapsed on the ground. His expression betrayed no words, only quiet contemplation as the weight of Seo's struggle hung heavy in the night air. Director Kim turned away, his long hair swaying with the motion. With a swift, precise movement, his sword sliced through the air, sending sharp bursts of force into the trees ahead. The trunks split under the sheer power of his strikes, embers scattering in the night as the sound of tearing would echoed through the forest. While sparring with him, Director Kim had devised a martial technique tailored to compensate for Seo's weaknesses. The markings of this new technique burned into the tree's surface, glowing faintly with heat and energy. "It may not be much comfort," Director Kim said calmly, "but I hope that learning this will bring you some peace of mind." Seo's eyes widened slightly as he read the glowing characters carved into the tree: Mountain King's martial art and moon crossing step. Recognition dawning in his voice, his grip tightened on his sword, a mixture of awe and reluctance filling his gaze. He looked toward the place where Director Kim had been standing moments ago and sighed bitterly. "You'll disappear again." Just like that, 5 years later, the serene courtyard basked in the gentle warmth of autumn. The once vivid greens of the surrounding forest had now transformed into a tapestry of gold, crimson, and amber. Seo tightened his grip on his sword, his weathered eyes filled with the weight of countless years. It had been 50 years since he had returned to this life, and now he could feel the end drawing near. He knew there was not much time left before death would finally claim him. Seo stood in the open courtyard, gazing upward as if speaking to someone beyond the mortal realm. "Brother Yong-hun, you died." His voice was heavy with sorrow. A deep sigh escaped him. "So this is the fate the heavens have chosen for both you and me." Seo's gaze softened as he reflected on the harsh truth of his journey. With my talent, he thought, no matter how hard I struggled, this was as far as I could go. His expression grew somber as he considered his fallen comrade. "And your talent, too. Perhaps that was its limit." Walking away with his sword in hand, Seo spoke with a voice heavy with resignation. "No matter how much ordinary men like us struggle, we can't escape the fate the heavens have set for us." From behind, a voice cut through the air in sharp defiance. "What kind of nonsense are you spouting, Seo Yun-hyun?" It was Director Kim. Blood streamed down Director Kim's face as he staggered forward, desperation blazing in his eyes. "Wait!" he cried out, his voice trembling. A violent cough shook his body, forcing blood from his lips. Seo's eyes widened in alarm as he caught sight of Director Kim's grave injuries. "Your condition is serious," he exclaimed urgently. Without hesitation, he added, "I need to get my medical tools from home." But suddenly, something grabbed Seo from behind. His expression tightened in alarm. His eyes widened, sensing something unexpected. In an instant, Seo was hurled into the air by Director Kim. And just as they flew into the sky, the ground erupted in a violent explosion of dirt and debris, the shockwave echoing across the courtyard. As they were hurled through the air, Seo's eyes widened in shock. "What?" he thought in disbelief. His gaze locked on Director Kim as a chilling realization struck him. Weren't both of his arms cut off? Director Kim shouted over the rushing wind, his voice filled with urgency. "Look, Yoon-hyun, that crazy cultivator bastard is chasing after us." A bitter laugh escaped him despite the danger. "This is the price I paid for blasting off one of the Judgment Stage cultivator's arms." Blood streamed down Director Kim's face as he let out a wild, almost manic laugh. He roared, his eyes burning with a fierce sense of accomplishment. "I dealt meaningful damage to a Judgment Stage cultivator." Director Kim's bloodshot eyes burned with a wild, unrestrained fervor. "I saw with my own eyes the realm beyond the five-path core," he declared, his voice trembling with exhilaration. "The one no martial artist can reach." His expression twisted into manic laughter. "I saw it with my own eyes." Seo's eyes widened in shock, his face frozen in disbelief as he looked on, utterly stunned by what he had just heard. Director Kim, his face bloodied and his robes torn, shouted for attention with a mix of triumph and desperation. Above him, a brilliant blue sphere crackled with immense energy, radiating an overwhelming power. With a wild, almost manic expression, he declared that he had risked his life and burned away his very life force to reach this moment. Seo's eyes widened in shock, his face etched with disbelief and awe. Staring intently at the sight before him, he muttered in a breathless tone that it was enhanced chi. Director Kim declared with pride that he had once used this very power to shatter the arm of a core formation cultivator. Below them, the brilliant blue sphere surged with energy, radiating an overwhelming force as it hovered in the air. The attack crashed down with devastating force, obliterating the buildings in its path. With splintered, debris flew in all directions, and the structures crumbled into rubble under the sheer impact. The air was filled with the sound of destruction as chaos engulfed the area. Director Kim turned to Yoon Hyun, urging him to watch closely. As smoke and debris billowed in the distance, he declared with pride that what they had just witnessed was the culmination of his life's work, having devoted himself entirely to the training of martial arts. Seo's expression softened with shock and sorrow as he gazed into the distance. His voice trembled, barely above a whisper, as he uttered in disbelief and grief that his house was gone. Looking upon the smoldering ruins, his heart grew heavy with loss. He reflected that he had invested every bit of money he had gathered over 50 years into this home, pouring his boundless fighting spirit into its creation. Director Kim, blood streaming down his face and his expression twisted with manic excitement, let out a triumphant laugh and shouted for them to look. He declared that he had traveled far and wide just to show this moment because he had decided to entrust his will to them. In that moment, Seo felt his mind go blank as a surge of rage welled up inside him. Yet, he forced himself to remain composed, steadying his emotions as he focused on watching Director Kim's martial arts performance. The spot where a grand 3-story building once stood had been completely obliterated, vanishing in an instant without leaving even a trace behind. Amid the burning wreckage, Seo reflected grimly that it was fortunate there had been no servants in the house at the time. Otherwise, hundreds of lives would have been lost in that single devastating attack. Seo examined the wreckage, noting the faint blade traces left among the few remnants. Realization struck him. The ball of enhanced chi from earlier had been a concentrated fusion of thousands of blade energies. Seo was struck by the sheer power he had just witnessed. It was stronger than any martial arts technique Director Kim had ever shown him before, an unbelievable force that left him in disbelief. Director Kim, bloodied but resolute, explained that this was how he had managed to shatter the arm of a core formation cultivator. In the past, he had been forced to rely on ambushes or assassinations just to take down cultivators in the chi building stage. But now he declared he could face them head-on. As the ground rushed up to meet them, Ko shouted in alarm that they were falling. Both he and Director Kim plummeted through the sky, their robes and hair whipping violently in the wind. The two crashed into the ground with tremendous force, sending debris and shock waves exploding outward. The impact tore through the earth, scattering dirt, stone, and shattered branches into the air as the surrounding trees shook violently. Dust and debris slowly settled over the impact site. Splintered wood and scattered rocks lay strewn across the ground, while faint trails of smoke curled upward into the air, marking the aftermath of their violent fall. A crater marked the spot of their impact, dust still rising into the air as the red autumn leaves swayed gently in the breeze. From within the settling haze came a faint, earnest plea, asking not to forget these techniques. Bloodied and lying on the ground, Director Kim spoke with labored breaths. He said that these techniques were the culmination of his life's realizations and pleaded for his martial arts to be passed down to future generations. Seo knelt beside the fallen and bloodied Director Kim, his voice firm yet filled with concern. He told him that he had heard his words and urged him to stop talking, reminding him that his life was at stake. Perched high in the branches of a towering tree, a figure looked down with a cold, confident gaze and declared that they had found the ultimate martial spirit. They remarked with a hint of mockery that it was quite a terrible place to try and run to. Below, Seo stared upward, tension evident in his expression. The cultivator in blue looked down sharply and called out to Seo, addressing him as a civilian. His tone was cold and commanding as he declared that Director Kim was a criminal who had committed unspeakable crimes against the cultivators, ordering him to leave him there. Seo, his expression tense and wary, looked toward the cultivator and asked if he was there to punish Director Kim, or if perhaps he was an acquaintance of his. Without hesitation, Seo scooped up the wounded Director Kim and sprinted away at full speed. The ground blurred beneath his feet as he dashed forward, determined to escape before the cultivator could make a move. From his perch in the tree, the cultivator in blue clicked his tongue in irritation, calling the attempt pointless. Watching Seo carry director Kim away, he wondered aloud if Seo had never heard about them from the ultimate martial spirit. The cultivator in blue let out a dark chuckle, deciding to treat the situation as entertainment. As ominous purple energy swirled around him, he taunted Seo, telling him to run as fast as he could. As Seo carried director Kim away at full speed, he looked back, his eyes widening in shock. Gasping for breath, he began to utter in disbelief. Seo's horror grew as he spotted a horde emerging from the purple haze beneath the cultivator in blue. Their lifeless faces and glowing eyes left no doubt. These were corpses. His shock deepened as he recognized them for what they truly were. Seo sprinted forward with director Kim in his arms, gritting his teeth in frustration and muttering that he was too old for this. Behind them, the corpses let out chilling screams and charged in relentless pursuit. What happens next? Stay tuned, the next part is coming soon. Don't miss it, and make sure to watch the next episode.